The more things change, the more they stay the same. Boundaries shift, new players step in, but the bozo gene always finds a place to rest its head. Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
Welcome to the King of Bozo Gene Tournament 8. Hey, everybody. That's episode 546 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever. We've grown a little bit accustomed to cozy two-seater podcast experiences because joining me, and we swapped out RJ, and we've brought in our resident biking expert, and even he's confused as to what's going on here. It's Cameron Buckley. Hello, Cam. How's it going, sir?
Well, dropping down to two people, it's perfect right at the start of hashtag cuffing season. But, yeah, weren't expecting that reference, would you?
Oh, no.
But, I'm just so sick of these people. I wake up in the morning, the crack of dawn. I've been sick for the last few days. You probably still hear it. I went from being regular sick to sinus infection sick, so everything smells terrible right now.
Ooh.
But, I wake up and I'm expecting a pretty boring race around Misano. There's no rain this time. And what do you know? The bozo gene cometh.
And the bozo gene taketh away, because we'll be talking about MotoGP's Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, the regional edition of the San Marino Grand Prix. I love that MotoGP does that. We go for the country first, and then we go for the region, even though San Marino isn't a sovereign state. It's confusing, whatever. Point is, it's the second race at Misano, and, well, it was a very different race than the first. First of all, it stayed dry the whole way through. Second of all, Jorge Martin still hasn't won a Grand Prix in quite some time. And third of all, Pecco Bagnaia decided to tuck the front. Again.
Death and taxes.
Death, taxes, you know the rest. So that was once again, the championship has had another flashpoint. I mean, if anyone in sports still believes in the phrase momentum, it doesn't. This is the proof that it doesn't exist, because this year has been a train wreck for the top two in the championship.
No. These two are fighting in a mud pit, and they keep falling over on themselves.
It is like an old mud wrestling match you get at a college frat party. It's just a lot of limbs everywhere. No one has any sense of control, and you all feel a little bit guilty about watching it. As Jason in our chat says, they're never meant to be, they're just mashing buttons. Yeah, it's like playing Tekken. You just mashing all four face buttons, hoping something cool comes out. That's this championship fight in a nutshell, and we'll talk a little bit about the latest twist in the tail in the next half hour or so. Alongside that, Pecco Bagnaia crashing, and the overtake scene around the world as Enea Bastianini won his second MotoGP race of the year, his third win in the scarlet red of the factory Ducati side, let's just say it wasn't exactly straightforward. It was a controversial one, to say the least, and we'll try to make some sense of it again over the course of the next half hour or so on this a little bit shorter than planned MotoGP episode. Also tie up a couple of loose ends in terms of news over the last couple of weeks. There's a fair bit of calendar news we've got to address as well, because I don't know why Dorna thinks it needs to release the 2025 calendar in installments, but apparently that's what we're doing around here. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But places you can find us real quick. We are on youtube.com/motorsport101. We're on facebook.com/motorsport101. If you'd like to follow us on Elon Musk's sued business investment, you can at motorsport_101. If you want to follow our personal handles, you can at Dre Harrison 101 and at cbuckley917. Into the show all around there. You can check out our website, motorsport101.com, if you want to get some more juicy details on extra thoughts from yours truly on the blog section on this race, Formula One's swear off at Singapore, and probably by the time this goes out, part 2 of my IndyCar season review, the midfield and the ECR news that has come out in the last 3 or 4 days that Rinus VeeKay is out at ECR and Alex Rossi is in.
Bring forth the Rasmussen.
The Rasmussen is the murder hawk christened on social media. I've heard a lot worse union-based dual nicknames. That is officially decent. I've heard a lot worse over the years.
Flows. It's got a good flow to it.
It's decent. It's decent. It's decent.
And, just think about it. Just think about it, Dre. If someone listens into us and they absolutely hate us, soon they won't even have the option to block us. Isn't that great?
It's wonderful. Imagine hating me and then being forced to still see my face. That I think is just a great karmic justice, quite frankly. But if you really like us, you can also back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to everything that we put out, i.e. all our episodes and some of our DRR content as well. Sometimes I put some stuff up there early for you guys to check out and enjoy, just to tide you over until full posts are released. You can upgrade to the $10 tier and you can get into the supporters club of our Discord server, which means you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded. It's Jason who's doing in our chat right now. Thank you, Jason, for contributing as ever. So all that in mind, without further ado, after this quick musical interlude, we'll get ready for the next battle as we talk about MotoGP at Misano.
You couldn't tell Dre has been on a massive Tekken trip the last couple days.
It was his 30th anniversary this past weekend, and I'm a huge Tekken fan. I can't help it.
Well, it was the clash heard around the world. Jorge Martin and Enea Bastianini are leading a fight for the win at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It's the last lap. Martin runs a little bit wide at turn 3. Bastianini sends it down the inside and makes the pass, while running Martin and himself off the road in the process. This incident was not investigated, as we found out after the race. There was no stewards action at all.
Nope.
And Bastianini won from Martin, with Marc Marquez another salvage job in 3rd place. Dre, how do we feel about this one?
It's funny because I was watching this in our Discord server and we were having a grand old time. We were playing Bohemian Rhapsody and headbanging and just having a merry old time, enjoying the intensity of the action. It was a race where Jorge Martin pretty much led from start to finish. Like, Martin got ahead of Bagnaia. Bagnaia actually had a really bad start. Apparently, he claims it was a dud Michelin rear tyre. More on him in a little bit. But Martin led the majority of this race. Bastianini was staying with him the entirety of the way through, looking for little half-hearted attempts at moves to try and figure out a way past. Couldn't quite do it. We got to the final lap, and as mentioned, Martin runs slightly wide at turn 3, compromises his exit a little bit. He opens the door half open, and of course Bastianini slammed his head into the door, fully committed to the pass at turn 4.
Smacked that thing off the hinges.
Yeah, I was like, hi, I'm here now, bang, and they initiate contact. Bastianini runs straight off the road. Martin goes with him. He's on the paint outside the outside curb. I think he dabbled in the gravel a little bit as well. By the time it was all said and done, Bastianini recovers on track, goes on to win comfortably. Jorge Martin is livid. He gave it the full "I'm in pole position" as he crossed the start-finish line in his displeasure as to how that played out. He calmed down by the time he got back to the garage. I know he and Enea are good friends, and they did hug it out, and there wasn't any lasting, beef. It wasn't a Rossi Marquez or Marquez Lorenzo kind of situation. Cooler heads prevailed on this one. There was no accusations of family cultism, but
that's an improvement compared to normal in this series.
Yeah, we've come a long way. The kids are apparently all right. Who knew? But this I would argue for the last 20 years in MotoGP, we've had pretty much the unwritten rule of it's no holds barred on the final lap. I've said it before. I've joked about the Verstappen amendment in Formula One. This was the Rossi amendment and we all know what we're talking about. Her F2005, the famous Valentino Rossi, I'm going to hip check your side pod and run you off the road strategy. I'm going to make the corner. This is the races. We all know the story. And it's been nearly 20 years since that incident happened now. And the general rule of thumb has been since then that anything on the last lap goes. I've never agreed with that mentality because it makes stewarding an extremely difficult thing to do, and it makes it incredibly hard for it to police. And this is another walking example of that. Like, by all letters of the law, okay, and here's the problem as well. The law is vague because I double-checked the rule book on this, as did one of my friends and colleagues, Lewis Duncan, who used to be my colleague at Autosport. He's now at Crash. All it says is, if you overtake, you have to do it in a responsible manner. And I've never been a fan of the stewards using that phrase of irresponsible riding to hand out penalties, because what is irresponsible riding? That is a phrase
deliberately kind of ambiguous, just from the very language that you use. But yeah, I mean, I'd say perhaps more than anywhere bar NASCAR, and we saw the limits of that tested this year because, well, Austin Dillon is a talentless hack. The last lap in MotoGP is kind of a boys have at it kind of scenario. You do what you got to do. And we've seen that tested, and we saw that tested here. The sport has made its bet on this one, but no, Jorge didn't crash, but Enea came from so far back, clipped him on the way by, and then went off himself. If he had kept it on the road, I'd be like, you know what? We've seen it done before. But the fact that he ran himself all the way off the road to execute that dive bomb is probably a step too far.
I don't think it's a great look for anyone involved in this sport if you're missing an apex by 10 feet and then not making the corner yourself to force an overtake on another rider. I think that's dumb. I think it looks stupid on television. I think it's stupid to have to explain to people why that's legal. And I just think it's dangerous. Like, there's no getting around it. I mean, and I didn't like... I was watching, obviously, on TNT's coverage, as we normally get in the UK, and Hodgson and Emmett, the two commentators there, Neil Hodgson and Gavin Emmett. Neil Hodgson knows his bikes, obviously former world superbike champion, a damn good motorcycle racer in his own right. He, like, of course, it's the usual angle of, well, if you're banning this, you might as well ban all last lap passing attempts, because we cannot deal in nuance when it comes to talking about things like this. It's got to be one extreme or the other, and I think that's bollocks. And I think there is room for mitigation, and I think there's room for nuanced discussion about something like this, because I don't think it's right that you can just dive bomb the shit out of somebody at a corner in a dangerous and out of control manner, run another bike off the road, and he's allowed to keep the win. I don't think that should. I think that's too far. I think that's putting through bad habits. I think it's endorsing sloppy and dangerous riding, and I don't want that to be a celebrated part of this sport. Now, don't get me wrong. I think part of the problem here is these bikes, because we are now forcing riders to take extreme amounts of risk and gambling in order to even think about passes like this, because a normal conventional pass is not possible in these bikes, in these conditions, under these parameters, because of the ride height devices, because of the dirty air following, because of the downforce that these bikes now generate. I think it's a huge part of the problem. But we're not combating the rule book. We're combating the very nature of bike racing and how it's been policed and stewarded for the last 20 years. And understandably, a lot of bike fans are not going to be here to be suddenly told that the last lap dive bomb is no longer legal because, I heard a bunch of people tweet me saying, oh, this is racing, not ballet, in regards to that pass. And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather we didn't torpedo another rider to overtake somebody either, quite frankly. There is a middle ground,
Yeah, if not saying ban dive bombs on the last lap. I'm saying if you can't keep it on the road yourself to execute the pass, it's not a legitimate pass.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the moment you mention that to some people who are bike fans, they will think that you're talking about Formula One. And if there's one thing that bike fans absolutely detest and hate, it's F1 comparisons because they think they're better than Formula One. And while that is partially true,
despite the fact that Dorna is out here desperately taking any option they can to try and be more like Formula One.
They are literally ripping pages out of F1's promotional handbook and even selling themselves to F1. So for all the F1 comparisons, there's a lot of validity in the claim because the same parent company is probably going to own both by Christmas time this year. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But MotoGP has been shamelessly ripping off Formula One's copybook for some time now, including dirty air following machines by accident and shoddy stewarding. And this is another example of that. And no, I completely
agree. The fact
that
it wasn't even investigated. We got the document after the race, and they didn't even look at it.
What was Freddie Spencer doing? Was he resting on the bench with a bag of nuts and just like, oh, race is over, cool, great? And did anything happen on that last lap as to why Bastianini's now 5 seconds down the road? Has there been any explanation for that? No. It's the fact it wasn't even looked at is outrageous to me. Like, we're just going to let that... Like, that says to me that Freddie Spencer was confident enough that he saw absolutely nothing wrong in what he saw, that it wasn't even worth a second look. That is alarming to me. That is deeply concerning that you've seen an overtake where the rider has lost control, not been able to confine themselves to track limits, ran another rider off the road, to the point where he has basically got to yield or crash, and nothing was done. You know what's terrifying? Luca Marini gave it an interview after the race where he basically said something that I think was a very good point. If Jorge Martin jumps off his bike and crashes, there's a much better chance he gets a penalty out of Bastianini.
Yeah, but and that's... And what that is MotoGP regulating not the incident, but the outcome.
And that's dangerous in its own right, because sometimes the outcome can be coincidental. Sometimes the outcome...
Something we have to call out with with Formula One constantly. Because It feels like sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and there's no consistency over there. With here, they just didn't investigate at all.
And that's the point. There is no consistency because a lot of people were quick to point out, oh, what about the track limits element of this? I know Miguel Oliveira and Marc Marquez both called out the track limit side of this contribution because Bastianini did run 2 wheels off the track when he made that pass. The problem was turn 4 was not being monitored for track limits. It was not a green painted outside curb where they monitor and censor track limits violations. So it was fair game at that corner, even though Bastianini did go 2 wheels off. The stewards decided that if you run wide at turn 4, you've not gained an advantage, even though in this specific instance, he absolutely did gain an advantage by being able to take a ludicrous risk by passing someone. So when is a track limits violation not a track limits violation?
Knock weary?
Yeah, I don't think it works quite as well, that one, does it?
We'll just go back to the classic. Knock wappy.
Because after all, no one knows what a penalty is. And this is the problem. Like, when 3 different riders can talk to the press and give them 3 completely different opinions upon what has happened, and it says to me that no one really knows what the book says at this point. And like I said, irresponsible riding is far too blanketed a term. It's far too vague a term for me to enforce it properly. And yeah,
that's by design.
It's by design. It's a lot like, again, this is me speaking from personal experience. I used to work in a bookmakers for 6 years. The way betting rules have always worked is very much in the same way. There is a level of bend in the rules where it can often be down to managers' interpretation as to whether to pay out a winning bet or not. You'd be surprised how often managers have to use their discretion when it comes to having to declare somebody a winning bet for a payout or not. It's a very surprising thing, but it's the same principle here. And unfortunately, I think you're going to deal with an audience here that I think is going to be very hard to be convinced that more regulation is required. But then again, these are the same people that bollock Freddie Spencer whenever he makes another deemed F up in the eyes of the masses. And I warn people now, it's not going to get any better next year when Simon Crafar takes over, because if anything, I think it could be worse, because Simon Crafar is already friends with half of these riders because he interviews them as a member of the media every 2 seconds. Again, I think Dorna has big conflict of interest problems when it comes to putting people in positions of power, but that's a discussion for another day. In other words, you're replacing one ex-racer as a steward for another one. And again, if you're an ex-racer, who do you think you're probably going to give the benefit of the doubt to?
The racers.
Exactly. And like the fact that the majority of people came out in defense of what Bastianini did is alarming to me, because I look at that and I go, how are you okay with that? Like, if you...
Can you imagine if Mark did that?
If Marc Marquez had done that, people had been calling for his head. They turned him into a bodicea. There would be outrage if Marc Marquez had punted somebody off the track at turn 4 to have a race-winning overtake. And yet, because it's someone that we like, and because it's not Martin, and because it's Bastianini and a home win, people are going to lose their collective shit. I think there's a lot of unconscious bias at play here, and I think there's a lot of... This is what happens when you have 20 years of Wild West stewarding determine what happens on final laps, and you're going to encourage people to take a lunge and take a risk on doing shit like that, and you're not going to get a satisfying outcome. It was annoying because I wanted to like this race even more, and we got kind of a shitty anticlimactic ending because we had him, what was, in my opinion, unfair racing at its core. I don't think that was a fair pass. And, you know, I'm okay with a block pass in the right circumstances, but this was more than that. This was over the line, in my opinion.
This is the races.
This is the races. I mean, the other big incident of this race really was, you know, Pecco Bagnaia, really, because he had a very strange
He just
race.
can't help himself.
He started from pole position, had the fastest ever qualifying lap of this track, a 1:30 dead around Misano, with scintillating form. Only his third pole position.
Almost got a 29 out of it.
Yeah, 1:30 dead. Led the early stages. Jorge Martin was able to pass him early. He really did knock Bagnaia off his rhythm because he ended up falling to third. Bastianini had overtaken him too. Pedro Acosta nearly got him as well before Acosta crashed early doors. But Bagnaia was about 2.5 seconds off the lead. All of a sudden, he finds some pace by setting 2 new race lap records back to back. And he's starting to reel in the front 2 again a little bit. He's within a second and a half or so. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, with 5 laps to go, he tucks the front on the run down to turn 8 and crashes. So, for all of this, on the one hand, Cam, these 2 rounds were meant to be house money for Pecco Bagnaia. He knows Misano better than almost anyone in the world. This is home
What
track.
did you say? What was plastered all over the timeline before the last race? Bet on Bagnaia. Why is everyone else even showing up? He's come home with one sprint. Sorry.
He's only taken 6 points out of Jorge Martin from the 2 races compared to Aragon when he was 29 points back. He's now 24 points back. So he's only taken 5 points out of Martin's lead in 2 bank-around weekends. Unacceptable.
Yeah. Not great. And we're currently going towards 2 tracks where Jorge Martin is a bad man. He is fast as hell around Thailand. He is fast as hell at Indonesia.
It's Japan first. Thailand's in the second flyaway block. It's Motegi at the end of this triple header block because, as you said, we've got Indonesia next. And then we've got Japan at Motegi, and then Thailand's in the second block of flyaways. But yeah, look, the story of last year was Jorge Martin leading the race comfortably by 3 seconds and then making a mistake, losing concentration and crashing in what would have been a gimme of a 25-pointer. And that was a race where Bagnaia won from 13th on the grid. This is a money race for Martin coming up next, and now he's got almost a championship Grand Prix worth of points back in front again because Bagnaia cannot, for the life of him, go more than 2 weekends without making a mistake, and it's happened again here. Like, he claims he had a dud Michelin rear. I don't know at this point. I mean,
would he have been able to set 2 race lap records in succession on a dud rear tire? I don't know.
At this point, it's there's been so many question marks about Michelin and so many question marks about riders, and it's the convenient go-to play for a rider if they're having a bad day to say they have a bad Michelin tire, and there's no real way of verifying it. Like Jorge Martin claimed he had one at Qatar last season. Michelin checked the tire and said it was fine. So someone was wrong here, and we don't know who. So it's one person's word against an organization's, and who knows at this point. The only thing I can say for sure is that Bagnaia overcooked it. He overdid it, trying to chase down.
He was completely out of shape going into the corner.
Yeah,
like he was offline, rear tire in the air, and the front of the bike just folded. It was just braking way too hard. You could see it in the body language of the bike, and he didn't need to. At that point, that's low percentage.
He was trying to atone for his early lack of pace by throwing everything at it to try and catch back up to the front two to try and win, and he overdid it. If Jorge Martin finishes second, which he would go on to do in that race, because Bastianini probably was the stronger man in the late portions of that race. We all know that Bastianini is a wonderful tyre whisperer. He's fantastic at looking after his rear tyre. It wouldn't surprise me if Bastianini was probably the faster rider on paper at the back end of that race. If Martin finishes second, Bagnaia loses 4 points. It's not the end of the world if you lose 4 points in that scenario. Take the third. If it's a dud Michelin, it's a dud Michelin, and he still ended up on the podium. There's worse days he could have had. That's fine in the grand scheme of things. Instead, you've gone over the top.
I say, if you've got a dud rear tire, why are you at 11 tenths?
If you're that sure that you've got one of them, then why are you going so hard to try and mitigate something when you know your back's against the wall? Like, if anything, once again, I question Pecco Bagnaia's decision-making skills, because I said this about Aragon. Blame whoever you want for the Aragon incident. Why is Bagnaia going around the outside of another rider on a blind right-hand apex? When he was blatantly the faster rider by half a second a lap. Like, you could overcome that delta and pass Alex Marquez whenever you want. And I'm saying the same thing here. Why are you going this hard to mitigate maybe 9 points at most? It's like you are 2 seconds behind these two with 6 laps to go. Chances are you're not going to make it, because we all know that Jorge Martin is incredibly fast, and Bastianini on a good day is as fast as anyone. You're probably not winning this race. You don't need to take this kind of risk. You would not, like, if anything, the front two had seen what Bagnaia's pace was. They were informed about what Bagnaia's pace was, and they raised their pace to compensate for that. So it was never going to work.
You're trying to get blood from a stone at that point. And again, like, it's like neither of these guys want to win a championship because, you know what? I bet Martin makes a mistake now. Just because. No reason, just vibes. We're going to look at the end of the season, and we talked about this a little bit before the show. I'm not nominating anyone for MotoGP as Rider of the Year. Because there has been so much fucking around and finding out from all of our championship protagonists. Even Mark screwed around in qualifying and left himself too much work to do on a day where he probably could have taken more points out of everybody.
If Marc Marquez executes a near perfect season with mitigated errors, he's right in this championship fight right now.
I'd say that about all of these guys, though.
I'd say that about Bastianini as well, because again, at his very best, Bastianini's pace is outstanding. So you know, it's been a MotoGP championship year. It's a weird year where the top four are all making regular mistakes. And it's like, who fucks up the least is going to win this championship. And I'm saying this for the second year in a row, where I'm not sure who's going to win the championship, because it's like you're waiting for the mistake to happen.
Like third year in a row, because even 2022, Pecco was awful to start the season. You had to cut a 91-point deficit. It didn't need to be that big of a deficit.
No.
And Yamaha continues to do Fabio Quartararo no favors. Ran out of fuel on the final lap. Yeah, that boy was nice. He was nice this weekend, and not as much to show for it as he could have had. But it's just mistake after mistake. And it's almost like they're thinking like junior riders and they're not thinking like champions. Where they just pick up the points, they'll get there. But it's the desperation to win this round or pass this guy on this lap. And they just keep blowing points.
Just the sheer lack of execution from both these two at the front, and from Mark in third to a degree, and from Bastianini in fourth in this championship. It's alarming. It is alarming that there are so many errors coming out of this championship right now. It's why I'm not convinced that if Marc Marquez can adapt to the GP25 next year when he joins the factory team, Bagnaia going to get his ass kicked, because Bagnaia, I worry about his temperament as a rider. I worry that if he panics, he makes the wrong decision, he goes over the top, he crashes, he makes mistakes, he's poor on Saturdays. I've said this before, where yes, say you may hate the sprint if you want, that's your opinion, right? But you play to the format that the championship has, and Bagnaia has been piss poor on Saturdays all year long, and this was the first time he crashed on his own on a Sunday all year. And if you're screwing up Sundays as well, then you're in big trouble. And Jorge Martin can and will punish you. I don't think he's going to make the same mistakes twice. Probably. And the fact that I'm not sure about that kind of says it all.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, the big issue with Mark this year has been qualifying, where he's still defaulting to overriding the front tire and just tucking the front. If he can get rid of that, his race days have generally been pretty exceptional. And even this year, Bagnaia, like he's a Sunday man, as they would say. But even this year, before the crashes, he's had a couple stinkers on Sunday.
He was struggling with the rear end chatter of the bike as well.
At the start of the year, yeah.
The start of the year, that was something that Bagnaia was really struggling with, and even then he still won a couple of Grand Prix early doors. And you know, well, and on the other end of the coin, Jorge Martin has not won a Grand Prix since May.
Dare I say it, he's starting to learn how to take points, because he has the last couple weekends.
He would have comfortably taken... If he took 20 points out of this Grand Prix when he arguably wasn't the strongest rider at the end, you'd take those.
Jorge Martin 2 years ago would have gone after Marc Marquez in Aragon, and he would have crashed the bike.
You're probably right in that regard. And this year I think he has learnt a little bit more how to ride within himself. I think this will be the bigger test coming up now, because we're going to get a few rounds coming up where I think it could be quite close. I mean, with
the rain call in Misano, it's almost a question of being too conservative.
Yeah, and it's
weird, very weird to say about Jorge Martin, huh?
Yeah, he played it safe, and it was the wrong decision of all times. Weird how these things have turned out. Before we go, a couple of loose things to tie up in terms of MotoGP news in general. First up, we've got some more calendar news. We got confirmation. Portimao is coming back in 2025 and 2026 on the new 2-year deal. Rumors are it's going to be right at the end of the year, so it's going to be like November, right before the Valencia season finale, instead of its European opening slot it's had in years past. I think they're going to move it back to November. At the end of the year. It's weird because I mentioned this before, that MotoGP has not released its entire calendar yet. It seems to be releasing it in installments. It's really weird. Oh yeah, we confirmed we're coming here. We're coming here. Get your tickets. This is coming out here. Like, we found out Silverstone was going to be in May a month and a half ago, and we've not released the full calendar yet. It's extremely bizarre that that's what we're doing, but yeah, so we got confirmation that Portimao is going to be on the calendar again at the end of the year. And the news that came out this morning that India has been postponed again until 2026. Originally, it was going to be right around now, actually, in this flyaway portion of the calendar as a replacement to Kazakhstan, which obviously has now been postponed indefinitely. Good luck ever seeing us race in there again. India was meant to be the replacement round. That got postponed until what we thought was going to be the season opener slot for 2025. And now it's been postponed again due to, quote, operational challenges. Which, from what I've been told, is a nice way of saying we don't have the money.
Yeah, I question whether we're ever actually going to be going back to India. If they're having this many, it just feels like they're going to keep kicking the can down the road.
It certainly feels like it. It's exactly the same frustrations that was had when Formula One tried to go into India, and they did for, I think it was a good 3-year spell.
Yes, the Vetteldrome.
The Vetteldrome, yes. But then again, ran out of cash, and that was just it. India was just done. It's a shame, because I think there is a very passionate biking crowd in India that would lap up an Indian Grand Prix. I think it would be a fantastic race to have in Asia. Fantastic fans, great atmosphere, hopefully safer weather. And it was going to be in March originally, and that would have been a much better time slot for it rather than September in the peak of summer.
Yeah, it's just too hot there in September. I mean, riders were right on the verge of heat stroke pretty much all weekend.
Yeah, just not ideal. And yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, because I do like India as a biking track, and that was a great idea to have it as a bike track on the calendar. But that will be for at least another year and a half, if not longer. We'll have to wait and see. Also, I forgot to mention, and I have mentioned now, but Balaton Park will also be on the 2025 calendar in Hungary next year. MotoGP, after years of trying, is finally going to have a Grand Prix in Hungary again. And I'm going to be honest with you, Cam, I don't know if you've seen the overhead views of the track, but
I have. It's crazy how they let Marc Marquez design a racetrack.
One, so many left-handers on a clockwise circuit, it's insane.
Was it 10 out of 16 corners are lefts?
Yeah.
He's going to punch the Hondas out of 107%.
Yeah, that's going to be a wild 105 in bike racing circles, remember.
Oh, they're hosed.
Yeah, they're in big trouble. And the second element of that is that there's a startling lack of runoff areas on big portions of this track. There is virtually no runoff where if you crash, you're going straight into the air fence. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't think this track is safe for bikes at this level. I'm concerned that and as well, we're already in October next week. They've only got about 6 months to fix this.
Yeah, because we need to see how the facility actually comes together. But tentatively, yeah, it's not a good feeling looking at where this is and the projected layout beyond the racing surface.
Yeah, they've been trying. Like, Battleston's been trying to get FIA Grade 1 status because it wants to get on the F1 calendar as well. Hungary wants to have 2 tracks. I mean, Hungary's pushing hard for this because they're renovating the Hungaro ring as we speak to keep up to date with facilities and things like that. And Balaton Park has wanted to be FIA Grade 1 to join it and maybe get 2 races in Hungary or maybe a rotational part of the F1 calendar. But they want to be Grade 1 for cars and bikes. And I will tell you for free, as a bike fan, you are not ready for that, Junior. You start expanding. You need bigger runoff areas because you're going to be hitting 150 mile an hour plus in a couple of these places. And if somebody goes down, the wall is right on top of you. That is far too dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that needs to be addressed and quickly because they haven't got a lot of time to fix that shit. We'll have to wait and see how that turns out. As mentioned, this is the first leg of a double flyaway block. This is the rampant end of the MotoGP season. This was the first race of 7 races in 9 weeks to close out the season. It's going to be fast and furious between now and the end of the year. We've just had Misano 2. We're going to have Indonesia this weekend. Get up nice and early for that one. And then we'll also be doing Japan at the Twin Ring Motegi, or the Mobility Resort Motegis, it's now known these days, for the Japanese.
Still the Twin Ring to me.
It's the Twin Ring to me too. Damn it, I don't care what you tell me.
That's another one that I wanted to mention here. Michelin. Congratulations. You may have earned the 2024 Golden Cock nomination from me because we are stuck on this terrible, no good, very bad, under-pressured, fragile front tire for what, another good 18 months?
Yeah, it's not ideal.
Tires.
We had a test last week with Michelin testing out what was going to be their 2025 new front tire. The riders loved it. Like, people, the reviews were glowing, far more responsive, far more understanding. You knew when it was about to let go. Felt like the old Bridgestones, and everybody used to love the old Bridgestone front tire.
That's the biggest praise you could ever give a front tire.
Right, yeah, because everybody loved the Bridgestones because the Bridgestones were responsive. You could tell when they were about to let go. You know,
a real race tire.
A proper race tire that gave feedback to the rider in real time, and it knew when to push. It knew when it was overheating. It gave you feedback and knowledge, and everybody loved it. Riders loved this test. They loved the new Michelin front tire. It's been postponed till 2026 because Michelin claimed there wasn't enough testing on it. How the fuck does that make any sense?
Straight to hell.
How do you test a front tire and then say there's not been enough testing to confirm it or not? How did you fuck this up?
And everyone is saying that it's a massive improvement. Everyone was so excited. All right, we're going into next year with tires that are fit for purpose. Nope. That makes everything better. That makes the racing better. It reduces the crashes. It'll make the... Oh, my God.
We're stuck.
I pencil it in now. They're my Golden Cock nominee. I've had enough.
We're stuck with these shitty front tires for another year and change.
Yeah, another year of pace increase on these tires as well.
Yeah, they're only going to get faster.
We're only going to get less fit for purpose over the next 2 years.
General rule of thumb, this year these bikes are probably about half a second faster net on what they were last year. Everybody's quicker. This year's Honda and Yamaha would actually be competitive in 2023's championship right now because of how fast everybody else around them in the field is getting. So we're only going to get quicker and quicker and quicker until this regulation change hits in 2027. And it's only going to get, the disparity is only going to get worse. It's only going to get more dangerous between now and then. I just don't. If you need more testing time, why are you not going to Dorna and saying, "Can you have another test, please"? No one's going to say no to more testing.
The teams don't want to dedicate it to the new front slick. The teams have been telling them to pound sand. Like, who runs this series? Mandated on one morning, hey, we're going to run the 2025 tires.
You get all the testing time you could possibly need. And again, the teams are saying we don't want more. Well, okay, fine. You've got all the testing you want. Michelin, drop the front tires in there, sit down with the IRTA and say, can we dedicate an entire test to these tires? Who's saying no? When it's going to be the same control for everybody. It's just unserious. It's unserious management from an unserious sport. These tires suck, and it's going to suck more for the next year and a quarter, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately, again. And the sport is like, and we're worried about radios killing the show when Michelin can't even get a front tire right.
And you know what? And then they're probably going to delay them. They're probably going to toss them for 26 too, because then they're developing a brand new tire for 1 year for bikes that are only going to run for 1 year before the ride height devices get tossed and the engines change for 27.
Yeah.
So then you're just throwing resources into a void.
Yeah, immensely frustrating as bike fans. We've got to talk about bullshit like this again on a weekly basis, but here we are. As mentioned, Indonesian Grand Prix this weekend at Mandalika. Hopefully no rain shaman is required because the forecast says rain all weekend.
Oh, yeah.
You can't see it, but you see it. But Cam just rubbed his hands on camera like Miguel Oliveira. It's like he's doing his best Birdman impression right now. It's like, ooh, yes, this could be a thing. If you're Miggy, it might be Christmas come early for you.
Good.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. So, it's expected to rain all weekend in Indonesia. That could be a fascinating Grand Prix weekend. Who knows what we're going to get at that point. We'll be reviewing that next week, as well as our IndyCar season review podcast. Going to sit down and we're going to review the best, the worst, and the indifferent of IndyCar in 2024. And trust me, there was a lot of indifference. So we're going to need a long one for that one. Grab a smoke. We're going to be here for a good couple of hours breaking down all that shit, let me tell you. So look forward to that. Until next time, I've been Dre Harrison. He's been Cameron Buckley. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Sayonara.
Yo, Grassini. It's going to be raining. Break out the throwback livery. Get that thing another win.
Yes, sir.